Welcome to Beyond the Riverwalk, the local weekly podcast that brings San Antonio's most remarkable people, places, and events directly to you. All links discussed will be in the show notes, so sit back, relax, and join Kevin and Melissa Barron as they ask the questions that you would. Now, let's get the conversation started.
All right, well, welcome, everybody. Welcome back to Beyond the Riverwalk. Tonight, I am joined by Aaron Marvel with MLS and SA. Now, I can tell you right now, I know very little about soccer, but I am eager to learn. We have been in San Antonio now for a little over a year and have seen things about it online, but do not know much. And I can tell you that Aaron is one of the experts out there, at least from a fan perspective, because one, he has this group, which we'll talk about, and two, he's also the co-host of another San Antonio local podcast called Pitch Black. And Pitch Black News, if I remember correctly. So we'll get into that, I guess, right about now. So welcome, Aaron. Thanks for joining me.
Oh, well, thanks so much for having me on the podcast. And I guess I should say welcome to San Antonio. I hope it's treating you well.
Thank you very much. That's very kind of you. Yeah, we are really enjoying living here. And one of the reasons, I guess, is because there is so much stuff to do. And this is one of the areas that I've really not gotten into. I've been to a Spurs game. I've done a lot of other stuff in town, but I've never been to one of the local soccer games. And the stadium I've driven by, it's a great field, it looks like. It's right there by Morgan's Wonderland for people that may not know, and a lot of people know where Morgan's Wonderland, I guess, is. But can you tell us a little bit, I guess, about you? I mean, how did you get involved in all of this stuff? What's your background in San Antonio? Are you from here? And, that kind of thing.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up here in San Antonio, and I moved away for a time because of just family stuff going on. But as the saying goes, I got back to Texas as quick as I possibly could.
I have heard that before.
Yeah. So I've been back for a while now. So, even though I departed for a while, I consider myself very much a San Antonian first and foremost. And, so about MLS and SA, I got into it with my involvement with one of the soccer groups in town called the Crocketeers. So I guess I should, just so everybody kind of has a clearer understanding of how everything went, I should probably backtrack a few years.
That'll work.
So the Crocketeers are one of the supporters groups we have here in San Antonio surrounding the team San Antonio FC. By the way, there's actually a women's team too, and we can get into that too. That's brand new.
Okay.
But let's just stay with the San Antonio FC for the time being. So the Crocketeers, they were actually the first fan group in town, and they formed even before we had a professional team here in San Antonio. So it was kind of cool, very grassroots, just recognize that, hey, there's a lot of soccer fans in town, and they were just organizing, things like World Cup watch parties or watch parties to watch MLS games or other international matches. And it just really kind of grew from there. And then you fast forward to 2012, and we actually get our first professional soccer team in a number of years. We had actually had professional teams, decades ago, the San Antonio Thunder in the 70s, and I think one or two other little smaller teams that admittedly I'm not as familiar with. But anyway, the San Antonio Scorpions, they came in 2012, and the next year was the year they built Toyota Field, as you alluded to. So that was built in 2013, so it's a relatively new facility. And then, just long story short, the owner of the Scorpions was Gordon Hartman, who actually runs Morgan's Wonderland. Which is why
name sounds familiar.
Yeah, that's why the stadium was built next to Morgan's Wonderland. And he, really was way more focused on the charitable part of everything that he's involved with, which of course is the central focus of Morgan's Wonderland. If the listeners don't know, Morgan's Wonderland is a theme park for disabled children. And they do that at no cost to the families who come to visit and enjoy those very specific rides and activities that they have. So it's a really cool thing, and certainly can't blame him for wanting to focus on that. And so in stepped Spurs Sports and Entertainment, who of course owns several teams in town, including the San Antonio Spurs, and they had long wanted a soccer team here in San Antonio. And so the Scorpions went away, and SS&E built their own franchise year one, which was last year, and that's San Antonio FC. And so now we're into year two. And just to go back to your original question, I know this is like the longest answer ever. So my involvement with MLS and SA goes back a few years, and it basically sprung out of the Crocketeers. And then when the Scorpions first started, we had huge crowds because they were playing in Heroes Stadium, which is a high school football stadium right across from where Toyota Field is.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and they were just getting huge crowds out of the gate, 13,000 for the very first game.
Wow, yeah.
Excuse me, in 2012. And, that was the moment where the guys in the Crocketeers were like, hey, we really do have something here in San Antonio. We figured we did, but now we know. And that's when they really ramped up the MLS and SA thing. And I ended up getting involved just by extension about a year or two later. So I've been doing this for a couple years now.
Well, the group that you've got, MLS and SA, if I can get that word out, for some reason I got tongue-tied. That group has been out there. How formal is it? Is it a club? Is it a formal organization? Is it a loose group of fans who kind of just work together toward that goal? How would you describe it?
So it's really a movement more than an actual group. Okay. As far as the side of it where we're operating. There's a handful of us involved, about half a dozen people. And we're working on different facets of things, everything from, actually meeting with, the bigger politicians here in town, including Mayor Ivy Taylor and Mr. Wolf, who's had a big part in this whole process. But, really what it is it's just us being a voice for the city of San Antonio and for the soccer fans in San Antonio, and basically saying, hey, we're here and we very much want MLS, and here are the reasons why, A, B, C, D, E, why we think we're a great market for MLS, which we can talk about if you want.
Yeah.
And basically it's just us doing our part to advocate for the city of San Antonio.
Well, that, like you kind of alluded to just now, that was one of my questions, and I've been thinking about this since we first connected. As big as the city is, and as there's so much going on, why wouldn't this be a market for, I guess, a major team? Why would it be looked at maybe differently to form what we have, which is, I'm sure is nothing to sneeze at. It sounds like it's a great group. But in terms of bringing it to that next level, what's different about San Antonio so far that it's not been attractive to MLS?
Well, actually, San Antonio has been on the radar for MLS for a long time. So okay. if you go back to 2005, San Antonio was right on the cusp of actually getting an MLS team. And, essentially politics sabotaged it at the last moment. If you remember in 2005, that was when Hurricane Katrina happened.
Yes.
And the New Orleans Saints got displaced, and they ended up playing a handful of quote unquote home games here in San Antonio in the Alamo Dome. And we had a transition in mayors, and the outgoing mayor was all about bringing MLS, and they were going to have them play in the Alamo Dome. And basically the incoming mayor said, well, this MLS thing is a bad deal and we don't want it, and really had their eye kind of foolishly, in my opinion, on getting the NFL and getting the Saints permanently.
Okay.
And we all know how that played out. So.
Yeah. Okay, so they're thinking basically it served as the stadium served as a home for the Saints after the hurricane. And they're thinking, well, maybe they'll just settle here
right.
over the
Exactly
long term.
right.
I gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, and then as you know, they ended up staying in New Orleans, so that was a big missed opportunity for San Antonio.
Yeah.
And essentially that franchise ended up becoming the Houston Dynamo, who've been very successful in MLS, winning a couple MLS Cups. But
wow.
so anyway, just to go back to your question, San Antonio has been on MLS's radar. The problem in more recent years is just soccer has exploded here in the U.S. And there are just so many markets now that want a piece of this MLS pie. And so the competition has become really, really stiff. And so this current MLS bid that we've been able to make, or I should say, Spurs Sports and Entertainment has been able to make, this is going to be a stiff competition. There's going to be 4 teams that are going to be named, and there's 12 cities going for those 4 spots. So, not enough chairs at the table.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, you kind of said it. I mean, exactly. You're not somebody that's lived here very long, and you can see what a great, vibrant city we are, and you're asking yourself, why don't we have more than just the Spurs here in San Antonio? And
yeah, exactly.
And that's the question we've all been asking ourselves. And that's a big part of why we got involved doing MLS and SA is, like I said, just to be an advocate for the city and say, look, we're a lot better than our reputation may indicate. You listen to any Spurs broadcast and they talk about small market San Antonio. I mean, we're the 7th biggest city in the country.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I feel like a lot of people don't know that. And when we tell people that, people outside of San Antonio, or in particular outside of Texas, a lot of people are very surprised to hear that. And so, we're working to build up our reputation.
Well, and looking online, I was looking the other day, just kind of to get a little bit of research done, and so I can at least talk intelligently and ask some good questions, I hope. I was looking at what has been expanded, I guess, in the past, and it looks like there was a team, if I got this right, correct me if I'm wrong, in Nashville recently.
No, they are actually one of the cities that are bidding.
They're vying for it. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Because I'm familiar with Nashville pretty much, and having traveled there a good bit. And that's definitely a much smaller, community, and I would think would have a little bit less to offer than here. So how do you think? I guess. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, well, I was just going to say, that's a perfect example, because there's a city that has more professional or major professional sports teams than San Antonio, and exactly to your point, they're smaller than San Antonio. So. I mean, we've been kind of fighting this weird perception for a while, but one of the cool things about MLS is that if you look at some of the more recent expansion cities and some of the bigger success stories in the league, a lot of them share very similar type of market that San Antonio is. You look at the Portland Timbers, they only have the NBA team, the Trailblazers, in their market. You look at Real Salt Lake, same thing with the Utah Jazz. Orlando City, who's been a really huge success in the last couple years in MLS, same thing with just the Orlando Magic. And you look at San Antonio, all we have is the San Antonio Spurs. So you would think we would fit that mold and would be a very attractive market for MLS because of, not having all this other competition in sports that a lot of these other places do have. Well,
and it sounds like that, based on your description and your representation, I mean, the fan base here is here as well. And the other thing, I guess, that occurs to me is, having been to at least one Spurs game so far, and hopefully get to quite a few more, it seems like an organization that's run very, very well. I mean, they take care of the community. They're the fans are devoted beyond anything I've seen in a long time. So I think what they would bring as an organization to this would probably be second to none as well. So it does seem like a lot of the pieces are in place. What pieces are typically looked at when they're making these kind of decisions?
Great question. So ownership is right at the top of the list. So you hit the nail on the head. I mean, there's really no better ownership group than Spurs Sports and Entertainment out there. I mean, if anything, you could say, maybe there's one or two that are on equal footing with Spurs Sports and Entertainment, but you're not going to find any ownership group that bests them. They are frequently at the top of ESPN rankings and all these other rankings. When you look at front office and management and how a team operates, and and to your point, it goes just beyond what is happening on the court. Of course, they've had tremendous success on the court. Winning 5 titles and being a playoff team for, I think, 20 straight years now, if I remember right. And so, I mean, just tons of success on the court. But yeah, you talk about off the court, Silver and Black give back, very involved in the community. And, like I said, it's great to have your outsider perspective. I'm sorry to refer to you as an outsider.
No, I mean, seriously, I mean, it's been like a year or so, but I mean, I still do feel like I've got a little bit of that vision, because these are some of the things that you kind of look at when you move here and you go, okay, well, that doesn't make sense. This is a gigantic place. Why? And it has, like I said, so much stuff going on. I mean, doesn't matter really what your interest is, you can find it here, at least in my experience, Yeah. So when you look here, it's like, there's a big hole, this doesn't make a lot of sense, especially when you drive by and you see that field out there. You'd see Toyota Field like you're talking about. It's like, boy, this must be an amazing thing. And it's got to be luring a lot of people. I know I was looking online at tickets for the coming season, and there aren't a whole lot of seats available in the early games.
No. Well, you know what? Let me come back to. We'll come back and talk about the tickets in a second. Yeah. But since you mentioned the stadium, and we're talking about criteria for MLS, that's actually the second biggest criteria is the stadium, and that's one of the more puzzling things to people like us that have really been following this stuff. Because the line you hear over and over and over again, and the trouble you see in some other already established markets, teams that have MLS teams but can't seem to get a soccer-specific stadium put together, like New York City FC, which, by the way, is the brand new affiliate of San Antonio FC. We can circle back to that one, too. That's kind of cool news from this offseason. But anyway, we've had and have had for a number of years here our own soccer specific stadium, and it's halfway built. So, when people talk about needing a stadium, we just scratch our heads and go, why don't they talk about San Antonio a little more than they do? Because we have a soccer specific stadium and it's halfway built. Yeah. So, expanding it from this point is relatively easy in comparison to, finding land and building a stadium. I mean, you just look at David Beckham, he's been trying for, pretty much the same number of years to find a piece of land that's workable in Miami to build his stadium and get that franchise off the ground, and he can't do it. So you look at all these markets that are struggling with finding a stadium, and we're like, hey, MLS, look over here. Look at our shiny, awesome soccer-specific stadium that everybody loves coming to see a game in. And, the one negative you can say about Toyota Field, and personally I don't think it's a negative, and I'll explain why. But you hear a lot of talk from Don Garber, he's the commissioner of MLS. You hear a lot of conversation from him about wanting and needing a downtown stadium. Now, Toyota Field is not downtown. It's not far removed from downtown, but it is not a downtown stadium. So some people knock us for that, and they think, we're never going to get a team because we don't have the downtown stadium. But I would argue that, just up the road from here is a market that MLS seems to, have a very keen interest in Austin, Texas. And with the stadium being located where it is, I mean, you couldn't be in a more perfect location as far as easy access for the fans that might travel down from Austin to see an MLS team. So in that regards, I think it's in a great location. And then I'll also just point to, the AT&T Center where the Spurs play. I mean, that's not downtown either. And, previously the Spurs had played downtown in 2 facilities, the Alamo Dome, right before they moved to AT&T Center, and then going back to the late 80s in Hemisphere Arena, which was right under the Tower of the Americas. So, the Spurs seem to be doing just fine in a non-downtown facility. And as I'm sure you've noticed, especially coming from other places, we're not a big residential downtown.
Exactly.
So, I would almost argue a downtown stadium in San Antonio doesn't even necessarily make a ton of sense.
Yeah, I think it would actually be harder to get people down there for parking and everything else. Now, I know they're developing a lot of condos and stuff like that, but still, that's not going to be major population growth. And from what I've seen, the population growth in this city, at least so far, seems to be focused, northeast, northwest, west, that kind of thing. It may be in other areas as well, but where you're talking about where Toyota Field is still in an area where there's a whole lot of development happening. So
Yeah,
you would think,
exactly right.
it would be more central to people, going to a game, whether it's nighttime, weekends, whatever else. Versus having to try to go downtown and park and all that. And we go downtown a lot, but
Yep.
for something like this and getting thousands of people in, that would be a little bit harder. I know what Comic-Con was like when we went to that last fall.
Yeah.
Trying to find parking.
Completely agree with you. Now that being said, if they expand Toyota Field, they're going to have to solve some parking issues, and I'm sure that's part of, the overall plan. But you're exactly right. I mean, that is the side of the city that is growing the most. And in fact, you just look north, period, between here and Austin.
That's true.
Is the fastest growing region in the entire country.
Yeah.
So, to me, I think you're much better served trying to be closer to that exploding populace than, just going 10 more miles down the road and sticking it downtown just to be downtown.
Well, so you've got ownership and you've got the stadium. What else are these groups that, I guess, the group or committee that's meeting about this expansion? What else would they consider?
Yeah, so the third biggest bullet point that they're looking at is the fans, and we definitely have the fans. And by the way, this is one of the things I would say to the detractors about Toyota Field. The fans already go to Toyota Field right now to see USL soccer and previously NASL soccer. So if they're already turning up at Toyota Field, why would they not turn up for an MLS team? But yes, I mean, we have definitely shown that we have a pretty strong fan base here in San Antonio. And, that is certainly about San Antonio FC in particular. Last year in the USL, they were fourth in the league in total attendance. And the league last year was 29 teams. So fourth out of 29, pretty good. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that, we don't get the crazy kind of crowds that you see in Cincinnati. Cincinnati is kind of the standard bearer for lower division soccer and attendance. I mean, their attendance is really wild. I don't know what's in the water up there, but they've gotten over 20,000 for a game, more than one time, and that is a bigger attendance number than you see at some MLS games.
Yeah.
So they're definitely making some noise, and Sacramento is another one. They routinely get over 11,000 for their games. So those two markets in particular, and a lot of people for that reason think that those markets are favorites in this process, and both of those cities are candidates for expansion. But it's one of three big pillars that we're looking at, and do those other markets necessarily check off all those other boxes? I mean, you can argue in either direction, depending on what you look at. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is I think that those kind of markets, they're great stories, and I'm certainly not going to take anything away from them. I mean, tremendous attendance, but I think those are kind of outliers. And, what you see here in San Antonio is still really strong, even though it's not up to that level necessarily. So we averaged over 6,000 fans last year. Toyota Field holds 8,400, if I remember right.
Okay.
And so we're not quite maxing out our stadium just yet, on a game-to-game basis. But, like I said, our numbers are really, really strong and really, really high for the division of soccer that we're at. And then, you look beyond just San Antonio FC, certainly going back to the Scorpions, the team that existed before San Antonio FC, their attendance was strong. They were first or second in the NASL in attendance, I think, all 4 years that they existed. So they had really strong attendance as well. And then you look at the bigger matches that have come here to San Antonio. I mean, we had USA Mexico in the Alamo Dome. That game sold out like 2 months before it even happened. We've had the U.S. women here a couple times, and one of those two was one of the biggest, like I think it was top 3 for the whole year in home attendance for the women that year. And then Mexico has been here before for other friendlies. They've gotten over 50,000 people. So, the interest is clearly here for soccer. So you look at those 3 things: ownership, stadium, and fans. From our perspective, we check every single one of those boxes. So, if you ask us, should we be in MLS and do we have a strong case to be in MLS? We would tell you, yes, absolutely we do.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. And obviously I'd be a supporter, but at the same time, it's kind of hard to argue with that. Even if you're not, it really is hard to argue with that. Well, what's the time frame for a decision? Is this something that we'd know about this year? Is it something in the next couple of years?
Yeah, so we're going to find out the first 2 of there's going to be 4 expansion spots total, which will bring the team, assuming Miami gets their stuff together and they come into the league. This expansion will bring the league to 28 teams. We are going to find out 2 at some point this year. They kind of keep changing their verbiage around a little bit, but generally what I think you can bank on is probably in the 3rd quarter of 2017. So, late summer, early fall, somewhere in there. We're gonna find out who the first 2 teams are. And then all indications are that there's a good chance the next 2 are going to be named the following year in 2018, although that is not confirmed at this time.
Okay. Well, hopefully a couple of years from now, somebody will find this podcast, go back and listen to it and say, well, you know what? That did happen. That's really cool.
Yeah, we would love nothing more.
Well, so last year was the first year for the team. This year's the second year. What can you tell us about last year? What was the season like being the first season here in town and being part of that from early stages and even before it actually kicked off?
Yeah, so it was a lot of fun actually being a part of a team being built from the ground up. So last year was kind of a trial by fire almost, because they got such a late start on the off season compared to all the other teams in the USL, because the team and the transition and making everything official didn't happen until the week of Christmas, which is really late as far as, starting your off season. And then you figure, you're just hiring a front office, you're just hiring a head coach or a manager, and then you're trying to find players, based on who hasn't already been signed. So last year was pretty hectic. They were working on a very short window, and we thought they did a pretty great job considering, everything they were up against and the time constraints and the player constraints. And, everything that comes with starting a team late. And, they had a pretty up and down season. The story of 2016 for San Antonio definitely was the defense was pretty strong, but they just couldn't score enough goals. They were definitely offensively challenged last year. And they came right down to the last week of the season needing a win. Had they won their last match, they would have been in the playoffs. But unfortunately, they lost. And even more unfortunately, it was to their in-state rivals, Rio Grande Valley, who last year was also a brand new team to USL. They're an affiliate of the Houston Dynamo, and they play in the southern part of Texas. And so we lost that match 3-0. And so on the last week of the season, our season ended, and they ended up finishing 10th in the USL West out of 15 teams last year, if I remember right. So it was kind of a mixed bag, and they didn't make the playoffs, but it was a fun season.
Well, it seems like a whole lot happened, though, in the matter of a few months to get it kicked off. So, yeah, that sounds pretty neat, though. But what you were saying, I guess, to start with, was that it was really a lot of fun. So what's the atmosphere at the games like? Because I haven't been to one yet, obviously.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty great. We have multiple fan groups as we've alluded to earlier, and they definitely do their part to keep the crowd going, and with the singing and the chanting and the smoke and the drums. I mean, they really go crazy. Those fan groups are definitely fun to watch, and when Toyota Field is full, which hopefully it'll be full a lot more this season than it was last season, man, that place really is a noise cauldron because the fans are, pretty much right on top of the field in all directions. There's not a bad seat in Toyota Field at all. So, if you hate going to Spurs games because you can only go sit in the upper deck and you're too far away and you're watching the screen the whole time, you are not going to have that problem at Toyota Field watching a San Antonio FC match. And I mean, I would just encourage anybody who's never been, or if you're on the fence, or if you just kind of want to give it a shot, just go check it out. I mean, we say all the time, it's the best sports deal in town. I mean, parking is free for all matches, so you never have to pay for parking. And the tickets to games, if you're a season ticket holder, start as low as $10 a game. And on an individual game-to-game basis, I believe they start at $15 a game. So really, really affordable, family-friendly entertainment.
Yeah, that sounds like something that we're going to need to do. I was looking at some of the early games, and that, like I was mentioning earlier, there are a lot of seats already sold. So it's something that seems like there's a lot more excitement for in the second year. But I guess going into that, so what are you expecting as a fan for the second year? What do you think the team's going to bring? How is it going to change?
Well, let me just first say that the season tickets that they sold last year nearly doubled for this season, and so now they're over 3,000 season tickets. Which is great. Again, I wish we had more, but they're definitely doing a good job of building this club from the ground up and really having this thing take root. And I guarantee you, if you talk to any season ticket members, and I am one, by the way, that you will find that people feel like they're family. That goes back to Spurs Sports and Entertainment, and just the way that they run an organization and how they treat the fans and the special events that you get as a season ticket member, great interaction with the players. Some of these fans are on first name basis with some of the players, and it's really cool to see because that's something you don't necessarily get when you jump up to, a major league level. So that's really cool. But yeah, I mean, you look at the outlook for the season. They had a full off season. They retained probably about half the team, and then half the team are new faces. A lot of them are new faces from other teams in USL. And, just kind of on paper, looking at the roster for this season, it's been a big upgrade, especially at defense. And like I said, last year defense was one of the strong suits of San Antonio FC, and I think they're even stronger this year. And certainly that played out in the opener for the season, where they won their first match 1-0. So they're off and running. Great start to the season so far.
No, that sounds pretty cool. We're going to have to get out to one of those, if not multiple, because it seems like a whole lot of fun. I know the fun we had at Spurs, and you're right, we were up in the nosebleed, but even so, I mean, everybody was friendly. The place was, the AT&T Center was taken care of really well. I'd imagine the field is as well. And you felt like you were part of a community, even if you're at a game. And I've been to the other cities and other games, and it just felt more like you were in the city, and you got to kind of look around you and make sure you're okay. Here, right. This community, San Antonio overall is a very friendly place. So I can see where the sense of community would be built pretty easily, among the fans that attend.
Yeah, and I really think that was one of the more genius things that that San Antonio did when they were building the brand of San Antonio FC, which was, they directly tied it to the Spurs by putting, just that little part of the spur right in the crest of the team, the logo for the team.
Yeah.
And it just draws that instant connection. And like you say, I mean, again, as somebody who's recently moved here, you see it. having only one major team in town, it definitely lends itself to a very, very passionate fan base because in a lot of respects, it's all we have.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I guess one of the questions I've got, and I don't want to wrap this up before we do talk about it. Tell us about the podcast that you're involved in, because it's also local, and we try to get out there and promote other podcasts. We've had several folks on the show already, and we've got some others scheduled. So that's one of the other reasons I wanted to talk to you. I'm really glad that y'all are out there doing that. So what's the podcast about, and how do people find it?
Yeah, so the podcast is called Pitch Black News. You can find it on all the traditional podcast locations, whether that's iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can find us. And I actually ended up on the podcast kind of by accident because my counterpart, Kyle, who he writes for the Rivard Report, and he also writes for his own site, which is pitchblacknews.com. He really started the podcast last year on his own, right when San Antonio FC right when they were beginning. And, much like yourself, he kind of noticed MLS and SA and just wanted to have us on as a guest and, just kind of talk about everything we were doing. And then we ended up just kind of hitting it off, and he asked me to stay on. And ever since then, we've been doing a podcast on a weekly basis. So it's been really cool. It's been really fun. We're into year 2, and you can hear us every week. We usually drop a brand new episode on Friday mornings for the most part.
Well, and what I've listened to, it sounds like y'all get along great, and he has some pretty good insights. I'm sure you do as well. There was a prediction I thought I heard. This was an episode, I guess, a while back. I don't think it was one of the most recent. Maybe it was in the last 4 or 5. That there was some news, I guess, that he broke on his website that came true, and a lot of people were saying, no, that's not going to happen. So you guys definitely have some insights to share, and I'm sure it creates a lot of discussion out in the fan community. So I would encourage people to go out there and listen to it, because I will be. I'm subscribed through iTunes Podcast and through Satchel, so I'll catch you one way or the other.
Fantastic. Well, hey, we really appreciate it. And yeah, I mean, anybody who wants to hear some good banter about not only San Antonio FC, but also the new women's team, which we should mention that before we wrap up.
Yeah, let's do that.
By the way. And just everything else. We'll talk about international soccer and, anything soccer related that's newsworthy. You'll find it on our show. So thanks for the plug. Appreciate that.
Oh, no, absolutely.
And yeah, so this is actually a brand new thing. We are going to have a women's soccer team here in town, which I think is very, very exciting. And they're called the San Antonio Athenians, I think is how you say that. Okay. It's kind of an odd name. I'm still haven't quite figured out the backstory to it, but I think it's on their website. So shame on me. I should go read it and be more familiar with it. But I can tell you that they are going to be playing in the WPSL, which is in a combination of semi-pro and amateur, and they are going to play at Blossom, which is one of the athletic fields here in San Antonio. And their season gets underway at the end of May. I want to say Thursday, May 18th is their inaugural match. So you'll have an opportunity to go see the very, very first match from this team just in a couple months.
Well, I'm going to do some research. I'll put some links out there, as well as the links to your podcast, to the website that you guys do, as well as just the links in general, because there is the way we connected was through Twitter. So you've got the Twitter account that's at MSLNSA, and then you've also got the Facebook page. How else can people find and get involved in this movement?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are all over social media. Like you say, it's MLS in SA, and we are on Twitter, we're on Facebook, and we're also on Instagram. And very, very soon, you will be able to log on to MLSinsa.com. We are just putting the finishing touches on a website that we've been working on for quite some time now. And I got to tell you, it looks amazing. I think people are really going to love it. And, that's a testament to some of the other people on the MLS and SA team. I'm not exactly Mr. Computer. But anyway, we're really looking forward to getting that out there. And once that website is up, I believe you will start to see a lot more ways that we're going to reach out to the fans here in San Antonio and talk about ways that we can connect. But for the time being, just come see us on social media. We're constantly having conversation about San Antonio FC for sure. More recently, the Athenians, and really just everything and anything soccer related. And, we love following the U.S. men's national team as an example. We have an American Outlaws chapter here in San Antonio, just like many other places across the country. And they're very, very active as well. And anyway, just if you want to join the soccer conversation, come find us on social media. We're always sharing articles, stories, especially, from our point of view, anything that has to do with MLS and specifically San Antonio's quest to be in MLS.
No, that sounds awesome. That is good. And I can tell you, I'm a little bit geeky about computers. It's one of the reasons I like doing this, building a website we had for the podcast and everything. But I went to the one that y'all have out there now, which is just kind of a teaser. And even that little teaser site is kind of makes you a little bit excited about, hey, man, what is actually coming? Because it talks about what's ready, and this is ready, and that's ready.
Right.
And
Yeah, I definitely would encourage people to go check it out just to see what you're talking about.
It's cool.
And soon it will be live and at a real actual website. And I hope people love it as much as we do. Like I said, we've put a lot of work and effort into it, and it looks A+. It looks really great. I think people are going to go wild for it.
Well, thank you very much, sir. I appreciate you being here. This is Aaron Marvel with MLS in SA. I'd encourage everybody that's listening to go out there and connect with them on Facebook, on Twitter, and Instagram. Follow what's going on. I've been doing that now for at least the last week or so, and we'll continue to do that, as well as listen to the podcast. So it's Pitch Black News. You can find it anywhere you find podcasts. And hopefully you'll subscribe to his as well as to this one if you haven't already. So thanks, Aaron. I really appreciate you being here, man.
Oh, thanks so much for having me on, and thanks for doing what you do. It's great to see a newcomer to San Antonio fall in love with the city and wanting to be an advocate for what's going on in San Antonio yourself. So pat on the back to you guys, and thanks again for having me on.
No, you're very welcome, and thank you for the kind words. All right, well, hopefully we'll see you at Toyota Field.
Oh, we'll be there.
All right. Well, and everybody else, thank you for listening tonight to Beyond the Riverwalk. This is episode number 7. So be sure you come back for episode number 8, 9, 10, and the many more that are out there. If you haven't heard previous episodes, go back and wherever you find podcasts, listen to the previous episodes. We've got stuff about San Antonio history. We've got stuff about Fiesta medals. We've got a lot of different topics because right now we're early in the podcast history, and we're just kind of talking to a lot of different people in the community. So if you've got ideas for show guests, you can also reach me. This is Kevin, and my wife, Melissa, who's not here tonight but is also a co-host of mine. You can reach us at podcast@beyondriverwalk.com, and you can also find us at Facebook, at Instagram, and at Twitter as well. We're out there doing the internets like everybody else. So again, everybody, thank you for joining us at Beyond the Riverwalk, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Beyond the Riverwalk. Send your comments, questions, and suggestions to podcast@beyondriverwalk.com. As always, subscriptions to our show are free and available wherever you find podcasts, as well as on our website. Until next week, join us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for more conversations about our community.